The way of heaven is to bring good, not harm. It was around 2000 BC that the last mammoths perished. The demise of this huge animal after 4.6 million years on Earth coincided with the rise of humankind. Compared to Earth's 4.6 billion years of evolution, human civilization has lasted for the briefest of instants. One after another, species have been and gone. Eventually, humans have come to the realization that every life is unique and extraordinary. That every species has the right to survive and multiply in their common home, Earth. Inside Nanhaize Park, there is a very special cemetery. Here, visitors pay their respects not to deceased people, but to other forms of life that once shared this planet.
你们听说过多米诺骨牌吗？一个倒下，然后后边叭叭叭叭叭叭叭叭叭叭全倒了。哎，你们看，这都是倒着的。
20 years ago, Wu Gong proposed the creation of this unique cemetery dedicated to Earth's extinct species. As a committed nature conservationist, he wanted to tell the story of biological survival and destruction in a compelling way.
灭绝本来是自然规律，在地质时期，鸟类300年才灭绝一种，兽类8000年才灭绝一种。今天的灭绝速率要比自然的速率要快1000倍以上。
The International Union for Conservation of Nature publishes a red list of threatened species. It records that humans have been responsible for the loss of 83% of wild mammals and half of plants. Since the dawn of the industrial age, Earth has been experiencing a sixth mass extinction of wildlife, one that is occurring faster than the previous 5. Yet, human beings are not a superspecies above the laws of nature. They are one of the dominoes. Nature is warning that if humans continue to conquer and claim without restraint, they too will eventually fall.
Distinguished delegates have said that this is an historical moment.
The United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, held in 1992, is popularly known as the Earth Summit. On June the 11th, delegates from more than 150 countries, including China, signed the Convention on Biological Diversity. The preamble to this document affirms that the conservation of biological diversity is a common concern of humankind. For the first time, a contract had been concluded to respect and protect the diversity of life on Earth.
我们有责任保护我们本国的环境，而且有责任为全球的环境保护做出我们的贡献。
In 1992, at the time of the Earth Summit, China was undertaking a full-scale modernization drive. 2 years later, the country issued the China Action Plan for Biodiversity Conservation and the regulations of the PRC on nature reserves. 4 years after that, it launched a series of major ecological projects covering such areas as natural forest protection and returning farmland to forest. And a year later, in 1999, a series of national wildlife protection and nature reserve projects were launched. Yunnan in southwest China is known around the world for its rich biodiversity. The altitude here can reach as high as 6,700 meters. The province, whose native plant and vertebrate species account for more than half the total in China, is celebrated as a kingdom of flora and fauna.
吴镇一先生在1942年到52年，利用10年寒窗的时间把它做下来，就为了搞清中国植物的种类。
The old, neatly arranged cards were created by the botanist Wu Zhongyi. Even though the country was at war at the time, he continued sketching and making notes by the light of the kerosene lamp in his specimen lab. On more than 30,000 cards, he recorded the name, appearance, and characteristics of almost every plant species in China. By referring to these cards, a team of 500 authors and editors from 80 scientific research and teaching institutions spent 45 years compiling Flora of China, the world's largest and most comprehensive work on botany. In 2007, the Germplasm Bank of Wild Species in southwest China was established in Kunming. Speaking about the bank, Wu Zhongyi told his students that it should be open to the whole country and benefit the whole of humankind. Let all useful plants shine, he said.
所以他觉得一定要强制性的保护这样的一些种子资源，为我们的持续发展和我们的子孙后代留下相应的基因，来支撑我们的未来的发展。
这份是新安柳的种子，已经清理好了。通过 X 光照片发现，这份种子只有1粒受损，那么它的饱满率在95%，符合了我们的要求，之后就可以入库了。
This vast building, the size of 8 football fields, contains the seeds of more than 36,000 wild plant species native to China. It also houses seeds of some 700 plant species from 22 other countries.
理论上来讲，这个种子放在咱们这个冷库里面，可以保存上千年，这就是咱们植物的一个诺亚方舟了。好了，放好。
Today, humans are aware that the more germplasm resources they save, the more hope they have for the future. The National Crop Gene Bank of China in Beijing preserves 520,000 germplasm samples. They include seeds of every crop variety found in China, as well as their so-called wild relatives. It is the largest store of crop germplasm samples anywhere in the world. The National Gene Bank of Forage Germplasm, located in Hohhot, stores 12,000 native plant germplasm samples, 100,000 plant specimens, and 1.4 million soil samples. These resources provide a guarantee for the protection of the grassland's biodiversity and ecological recovery. In the eastern city of Yantai, China has established the world's first gene bank that includes every potential example of saturation mutagenesis in wheat. No other country can rival China for its knowledge of how the genetic composition of every species is formed through thousands of years of evolution under different ecological conditions.
在野外的时候，眼睛会到处去找，一旦看到了，就跟找到宝贝一样，这个很兴奋的。野生稻就是杂草，一株杂草都可以改变一个国家的命运，就是指的野生稻。
Freely growing wild rice with its complex and diverse genetic makeup has an extraordinary ability to improve rice cultivation. Yet, with the continuous expansion of planned agriculture, since the 1980s the expanse of wild rice has been in sharp decline, to the point that it's facing the danger of extinction. For more than 2 decades, Yang Qingwen has been leading a research team dedicated to accurately identifying the scale of wild rice growth across the country. Part of their job is to protect the wild rice genes from being affected by cultivated rice. One way of doing this is to create a safe area for it to grow.
这个保护点呢，是受到我们当地政府和村民的大力支持。因为在这个野生到100米范围之内，不允许有水稻的出现。开发时的创粉，这里100多亩田不种水稻，在这边。
The origin of rice cultivation can be traced back 15,000 years to Hunan. Today, people here have given up land that had been cultivated for thousands of years, pulled up fences, and posted warnings, all in order to protect the wild rice.
通过建立信息库的形式，向全国发布这个利用野生稻的专家能够了解我们这些资源，使得这些资源能够被利用。
China has 23 critically endangered wild rice populations distributed in 7 provinces, namely Jiangxi, Hunan, Fujian, Guangdong, Guangxi, Yunnan, and Hainan. All are included in the National Biological Resources Conservation Plan. On November the 2nd, 2020, news coming out of a village called Qingzhu in Hongyang, Hunan, caused an international sensation. Double cropping rice had achieved a world record yield of almost 23 tons per hectare. By the end of the year, China could report national rice output of just under 212 million tons. This meant that the country could guarantee the food security for its 1.4 billion people. The ancient Chishui, as it flows across the Yunnan-Guizhou Plateau on its way to join the Yangtze, carries in its waters the mellow aroma of Motai liquor. For people living beside it, fishing has been their way of life for generations. However, by the end of last century, their traditional livelihood was under threat from over-exploitation.
挨到河边就看这个岛屿为生，这个鱼是越捕越少。
The distress of the Chishui was shared by the entire Yangtze River Basin. There's virtually no other river in the world that can rival the Yangtze for the richness of its biodiversity. Of its more than 4,300 forms of aquatic life, 170 are unique to it. Yet, after hundreds of millions of years of evolution and little more than 2,000 years of human influence, the ecosystem was on the verge of collapse. "87-year-old academician Cao Wenxuan has been working on the Yangtze River since 1955. He has seen at first hand the decline of fish resources. He has also witnessed the disappearance of the baiji, the Yangtze River dolphin.
北极灯的食物是鱼，鱼少了它食物也少了，再加上那个捕捞，特别是那个电捕啊、滚钩啊，不把它取缔的话，那没办法，这就已经完了。
Deeply concerned about the crisis faced by the Yangtze River, in 2006, Cao proposed a complete fishing ban. However, he knew the measure was likely to face opposition from the fishermen who had depended on the river for their livelihood for generations.
做报告都说应该修，当然也许很多具体困难啊，光靠渔业部门他们也没办法修的啊，毕竟还有10几万那个渔民呢。
In 2012, the construction of an ecological civilization was incorporated into the Plan for National Development. China appeared. A key element of the plan was to promote well-coordinated environmental conservation and avoid overdevelopment. On January the 1st, 2017, it was announced that a 10-year fishing moratorium would be enforced along the length of the Chishui River.
渔民上岸就给了我们一些很好的补偿，没事的时候就过来，大家互的管一下这个生态这个河。
The moratorium is now in its 4th year. Cao regularly sends researchers to the Chishui to monitor the changes in the fish population. The scientists are usually accompanied by former fishermen.
我们今天这个收了3个大的这个定制刺网，见到了比较多的这个长吻尾，就是俗称的江团。 啊，并且这么大的这个在往年是比较少见的。
加鱼的，现在只能用1竿1线1钩哦。
On January the 1st, 2021, China embarked on a new stage in its biodiversity conservation program. Along the Yangtze River, the birthplace of Chinese civilization, a 10-year fishing ban was officially introduced. In the first year, 110,000 fishing boats have suspended operations, and almost 280,000 fishermen have hung up their nets. The cost to the national treasury in terms of compensation is estimated at over 20 billion yuan.
实验修鱼它的意义不光是保护几条鱼的问题，啊，真是保护这个生态，啊，保护这个生态系统。我这今年87了，实验之余啊，我可能等看不到了。
10 years is a long time in a human life, but it's equivalent to the reproductive cycle of 3 generations of fish. After 10 years, the renewed, more abundant fish resources will nourish the entire basin ecosystem. The ban on fishing in the Yangtze River Basin epitomizes China's approach to biodiversity conservation. Every protection project requires a choice to be made between the present and the future. How should humans treat other living species? This is not a question with multiple choice answers. There's only one correct response, and that's to respect and protect every species.
相比麻醉装车运输的话，它是一个清醒的状态在车里面，那么我们运输起来就很安全。一定要把这个通道做好，不要有缝，不要有死角。
The enclosed passage was specially designed by Chung Jibin and his team to encourage the 11 Milu to board the vehicle. The Milu, fitted with tracking devices, are being sent to the south, where they'll be released into the wild. The Milu, or Pear David's deer, is an endangered species. Though it's native to China, 100 years ago, war and other factors meant no more were found here. Then, in 1985, the UK returned 20 Milu to China. Beijing, Jiangsu, and Hubei established protection areas where the deer could roam free. Their numbers have risen steadily, and their population now exceeds 8,000.
撒点食物，让它能看见胡萝卜。
一二走！一二走！
这边呢，来那么两个人，给一定的压力之后，还有一个挡板需要推一下，可以推着它。它看不见的话，一般不会撞。 这么就直接就给它推到车上去。
Chung Jibin's destination is Dongting Lake in Hunan Province. There are already more than 200 wild Milu there, and these 11 will join the herd.
水箱已经下去一大半了，2到3堆的粪球成团成粒的那种，很新鲜，很健康。车厢内的胡萝卜已经全部被吃没了，一个是补充营养，第二个是它含的水分比较大。胡萝卜也是它最喜爱吃的食物之一。
After a 32-hour journey, the Milu arrive safely at Dongting Lake.
咱们现在路还好，都到了，挺好的。
好，我们这边围栏这边也都准备好了。
咱们现在开始。
开始吧，先把车倒过来。
The Milu Rescue Center has set up a temporary enclosure for the new arrivals. Over the past few years, they've brought in Milu from Hubei and Jiangsu in order to improve the herd's genes.
可以说，在洞庭湖已经汇聚了中国3大麋鹿群体。这样的话，他们个体之间的这种交流，这种遗传方面的交流，可以说能够使洞庭湖的这个麋鹿种群能够更加健康的去发展壮大。
他们能够从半散换种群，然后回归这么美丽的地方，就是这么美丽的湿地， 他们应该会很高兴，他们自己应该会跑得很欢快。
It's a law of nature that the greater the number of individuals in a species, the greater the potential for genetic variation and the richer the genetic diversity. Milu, once on the verge of extinction, are now proudly and confidently roaming their ancestral land. Over the past 30 years, China has introduced a series of special programs to protect its most endangered animals and plants. It has also established 250 wild animal rescue and breeding bases and promoted the recovery and development of more than 300 rare and endangered species. In China, the red-crowned crane is considered sacred. The chicks undergo a daily training program to prepare them for their twice-yearly long-distance migration. To date, the Jialong Nature Reserve has released more than 300 red-crowned cranes into the wild. The Przewalski's horse is the only surviving species of wild horse in the world. These horses have been returned to their ancestral home from overseas. Here, at the world's largest wild horse breeding center, they are bred and prepared for release into the wild. 240 of them have so far been returned to the wild. The crested ibis is one of the oldest birds on Earth. Once on the verge of extinction, it has been saved by a program of artificial incubation. There are now some 7,000 crested ibises living in their natural habitat in China. They have settled in Shanxi, Zhejiang, and Henan. Others have drifted across the sea to Japan and South Korea. Giant pandas have been inhabiting Earth for 8 million years, a symbol of a global wildlife conservation effort. This Chinese national treasure at one time faced extinction. Over the past few decades, China has established 67 special reserves where giant pandas are bred in captivity before being introduced into the wild.
大熊猫野外种群数量达到了1800多只，受威胁程度等级由濒危降为易危。
This achievement in boosting the panda population attests to China's success in improving the living environment for other species. The most sustainable form of guardianship is achieved by returning animals to the wild. Endangered species are seeing a recovery of their populations, from being critically endangered to prospering. This is the Chinese vision of biodiversity conservation. At the foot of Mount Guanyin in Shenzhen, in front of a large terraced building, is a group sculpture. It depicts a pair of mammoths and is a memorial to the extinction of life. The building, in China's most economically and technologically active area, houses a vast gene bank, the largest in the world, which was established in 2016.
生物多样性保护的角度，如果能够把基因保存下来，也就意味着我们把生物多样性、把生命保存下来了。
This vast resource stores genetic samples of hundreds of thousands of plant species, millions of animal species, and some 10 million microorganisms. It has the capacity to maintain over 65 million gigabytes of genetic data in digital form, more than enough to include all the known and available genes of every form of life. After a history of ignorance and neglect, Humankind is now awake to the need to safeguard nature's rich biodiversity.